Welcome to The Explainer. We're jumping right in today because we are unpacking a totally fascinating, potentially paradigm-altering proposal. It's all detailed in a document titled The Universal Major, The Big Shift. Now, I want you to imagine a world where the entire maze of traditional university degrees, your bachelor's, your master's, those super specialized PhDs, is just completely swept away. And in its place, a single, unified doctorate designed to teach you absolutely everything, all in exactly 38 months. Let's dive into this wild new structural approach to higher education. So this brings us to the core concept of what the author calls the big shift. We're looking at a proposed educational model that pitches a singular, universal curriculum. And when the document says it covers everything, it is literally not using hyperbole. We're talking about a curriculum that spans from the foundational ethics of building a civilization entirely from scratch all the way up to programming humanoid robots. It's a massive, radical departure from the specialized silos we see in modern education. Now, let's look at the raw data, because the numbers here are pretty staggering. According to the source, this totally comprehensive doctorate, the one meant to replace all other degrees, would cost exactly $3,000 in total. And just to be clear, that's not per semester, that is total. It breaks down to about $107 a month, which positions extreme financial accessibility as the absolute cornerstone of this new global infrastructure. I mean, just think about that for a second. In the context of the crippling reality of modern student debt, it's a game changer. But for our explainer today, this is the number I really want us to zero in on: 38 months. That is exactly 3 years and 2 months. The proposal claims that it can deliver this entire universe of knowledge, resulting in a full doctorate degree in just 38 months right after a high school diploma. So you're probably wondering, how on earth does one compress the absolute sum of human knowledge into that kind of time frame without completely overwhelming the student? Well, that is the structural mystery we're going to unravel right now. Here's how we're breaking it all down today. First, the universal doctorate. Second, the 38-month timeline. Third, the harm of specialization. Fourth, grading the big shift. And finally, the funding ecosystem. Section 1, the universal doctorate. Teaching the universe. Okay, so the scope of this curriculum is incredibly sprawling. It actually starts with divine revelations, specifically integrating texts like the Bible and the Quran, along with Prophet Muhammad's quotes. It then merges those foundational ethics with something it calls civilization design, but it certainly doesn't stop at philosophy. It scales all the way up to conceptual and deep sciences and heavily integrates AI, robotics, and future systems. Finally, to top it all off, it requires practical professional skills, including a mandatory 3-month physical job market experience. It really is a total fusion of the spiritual, the societal, and the deeply technical. And the underlying philosophy driving this absolute behemoth of a curriculum? Connectivity. As you can see, the author argues this is literally the only major people need to study. Why? Because according to the text, you cannot truly understand medicine or engineering or law in total isolation. You have to understand how those disciplines plug into the entire universe to be truly effective at them. Section 2, the 38-month timeline. The math behind the degree. So how do we fit the universe into 38 months? The scheduling outlined in the document is actually highly specific. It proposes a live course running from 4 to 8 p.m. Makkah time zone. That's 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. And to prevent students from burning out, it specifically avoids weekend study, which totals about 88 hours a month. If you multiply that out over the 38 months, you hit 3,400 total hours. That's the exact time budget to master the universe. And the daily workflow for those 4 hours is entirely digital and heavily structured. Step 1, students watch a YouTube live recording where the instructor breaks down the day's priority subjects. Step 2, everything is documented in unified Google Slides, which are then run through an AI explainer for, as the text calls it, clean understanding. Step 3, students take a Google quiz on the material. And finally, Step 4, to graduate, students just submit their high-score quiz forms along with their $3,000 in payment invoices. The whole thing is designed to be a highly accessible, globally standardized loop. Section 3, the harm of specialization, the case against traditional degrees. Now, this is where the proposal gets really provocative. The text actively argues that traditional, narrow majors create dangerous blind spots. It claims that deep specialists ignore ethical connections and long-term consequences. In stark contrast, the universal major is idealized as producing graduates who see all the connections and therefore innovate ethically. In fact, the document literally states that if you specialize in just one field while the universal major exists, it will be bad for them and others. To back this up, the author gives some very specific examples. A doctor without civilization knowledge, the text argues, can actually inadvertently harm society. An engineer without a universal ethical foundation might build dangerous systems. And this one's fascinating. An AI developer who doesn't understand divine revelation might create incredibly harmful technology. The core argument here is that incomplete knowledge directly leads to harmful actions, which in the author's eyes makes the universal major a global necessity, not just a fun alternative.
Section 4. Grading the Big Shift. The 10-10 Evaluation.
The document actually includes its own self-evaluation, framed as a 2026 Microsoft Copilot analysis. And as you can see, the universal major sweeps the board. In breadth, it gives itself a perfect 10, compared to a 6 for a traditional PhD. In AI integration, a 10, while a traditional medical degree gets a 4. Now, interestingly, it does acknowledge that traditional PhDs and MDs achieve a 10 in depth, but it claims the universal major also hits that 10 in depth because it relies on partner universities to step in and provide specialized expansion courses. So ultimately, the document boldly claims this is the first education system to ever achieve a perfect 10 out of 10 score across the board. And the reasoning? Well, because unlike traditional majors, which the text says freeze for years, the universal major is designed to update daily via its live Google Slides. If an inaccuracy is found anywhere, it's corrected immediately and previous students are notified. That continuous evolution, paired with the global accessibility we talked about, is what the text argues earns it that perfect score. Section 5, the funding ecosystem. The 30-30-30-10 split. All right, let's talk logistics. How does a massive global infrastructure sustain itself on a mere $3,000 tuition fee? The author outlines a very specific, self-sustaining financial loop based on a 30-30-30-10 split. It's a revenue-sharing ecosystem designed to be fair, balanced, and, most importantly, attractive to the established institutions required to give the degree its legitimacy. So here's how the pie gets sliced. 30% goes straight to a sponsoring university. In exchange, they accredit the certificate, provide professors for Q&As, and create those deep-dive expansion courses we mentioned. Another 30% goes to a cultural institution. Their job is to produce high-quality visual learning videos for hands-on, practical experience. 30% goes to the founder, named in the text as Mohammed Abdullah Hussain Alattas, who hosts the live course, manages the infrastructure, and designs the curriculum. And that final 10%, that goes into a scholarship fund for students who can't swing the $3,000. So it's an ecosystem where every single player has a distinct specialized duty to support the generalist students. Taking a step back, the absolutely crucial point to take away from this text is the source's ultimate vision for the big shift. It is entirely about replacing the fragmented, siloed nature of modern academia with one interconnected, highly compressed 38-month journey. It's pitching the transformation of global education via the world's first unified, globally accessible, and continuously updated civilization-building doctorate. Which leaves us with a massive, incredibly provocative question to ponder. The source material is totally adamant that specialization is harmful and that seeing the connections between all fields is the absolute only way forward for humanity. But what do you think? Will the civilizations of the future be built by deep specialists working in their isolated genius, or by universal generalists who understand a little bit of everything in the universe? It's a fascinating debate, and honestly, it's entirely up to you to decide. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning how we learn.
Welcome to the Explainer. So think about your own education for just a second. We usually learn in these fragmented pieces, right? A little math here, some history over there, and we rarely get to see how it all actually connects. But today, we're looking at something truly unprecedented. We're going to dive into this ambitious, sweeping framework that's literally designed to teach the entirety of existence. Yeah, you heard that right. It's called the Universal Major. We're going to break down its core structure, and we're specifically focusing on the 4 degrees of knowledge that make up this absolutely incredible academic journey. I mean, imagine trying to build a curriculum that covers every single domain of the universe without missing a thing. It sounds impossible, but as you're about to see, it's all about structure.
Okay, let's dive into this. 3,400. That staggering number actually represents the total hours of live recording required to master every subject in the universe according to this framework. Now, when you first hear that, it sounds massive, right? But when you really consider that it's meant to encompass literally all human knowledge, it's actually a shockingly small number. It turns out to be an incredibly efficient way to learn, well, everything.
To understand how this works, we're going to scale the exact staircase of mastery a student would face. Consider this our academic meta-syllabus for today. First, we'll look at the complete universal curriculum. Then we'll climb through Degree 1, Building Awareness, followed by Degree 2, Foundational Mastery, Degree 3, Advanced Depth, and finally Degree 4, Civilization Integration. And we'll wrap it all up by looking at the architecture of all knowledge.
Section 1. The Complete Universal Curriculum.
Now, you might be asking yourself, how on earth could anyone possibly organize absolutely everything into one unified system without it just collapsing into complete chaos? Well, it turns out the creators solved this by categorizing all existence into 12 universal domains. You've got everything from revelation and divine knowledge to the physical universe, engineering, computing, and AI, all the way over to arts, personal development, and future systems. The really brilliant part here is that all 211 academic subjects in existence fit perfectly into these 12 distinct domains. Nothing is missed, and there's zero overlap.
What's really interesting about this slide is how the curriculum approaches these subjects over time. You don't just learn a topic once and leave it behind. No, every single subject is revisited across the 4 degrees of knowledge with increasing depth each time. So you start at the associate level to build awareness, move to a bachelor level for foundational mastery, hit the master level for advanced depth, and finish up with a doctorate for full civilizational integration. It's this continuous upward spiral of understanding. If we look at the hour distribution across these 4 degrees, you'll see a really elegant, balanced spread. The associate degree requires 600 hours, the bachelor is 1,000, and both the master and doctorate degrees are 900 hours each. The heaviest time investment is clearly right there at the bachelor level, which honestly makes perfect sense. Unlearning bad habits and pouring a proper intellectual foundation, that's always the hardest part of mastering anything. Once that foundation is set, everything else just accelerates.
So how long does this all actually take in the real world? Well, if you're studying 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, scaling this entire academic staircase takes just over 3 years and 2 months. I mean, really think about that for a second. That's less time than a standard university degree. Plus, there are absolutely no filler electives or generic prerequisites to slow you down, and ideally, no mountain of student debt for classes you didn't even want to take. You go from a basic awareness of the universe to a doctorate-level integration in just 38 months of focused daily learning.
Section 2. Degree 1. Building Awareness.
This is where students actually construct their initial mental map of reality. Think of this 600-hour phase as the blueprint. The goal here is simple. See the whole universe for the very first time. This level isn't about mastery at all. It's about pure orientation and clarity. For example, you might spend 10 hours on physics just to understand the basic concepts of gravity and matter, and then 10 hours on computing to understand what an algorithm is. It's the ultimate bird's eye view, just making sure you actually know what exists in the world before you ever try to tinker with it or figure out how it all works.
Section 3. Degree 2. Foundational Mastery.
This phase is appropriately called the foundation. As we scale the 4 degrees of knowledge, if Degree 1 was drawing the blueprint, well, this phase is pouring the concrete. It's a massive 1,000-hour commitment designed to help you learn the universe properly. During these 12.5 months, you're shifting from just knowing things exist to actually building real intellectual strength. Awareness transforms into actionable knowledge, giving students the ability to explain and analyze systems across all 12 domains. So instead of just knowing that human biology exists, you're now spending 160 hours diving deep into anatomy, physiology, genetics, and ecology.
And this brilliantly illustrates the spiral nature of the curriculum. Let's trace a single domain, like computing and AI as an example. At the associate level, you learn basic Python and web concepts. At the bachelor level, you advance to data structures and machine learning. By the master level, you're tackling deep learning and neural nets. And can you imagine the leap at the doctorate level? You are literally architecting AI systems for an entire civilization. It's the exact same subject, constantly deepening as your capacity grows.
Section 4. Degree 3. Advanced Depth. Ascending to the 3rd step of the staircase, learning shifts away from foundational understanding and moves entirely into advanced engineering and critical analysis. We call this phase the engineering. It's a 900-hour master level where you go deep in everything to evaluate knowledge and solve complex problems. Think about the biggest problems in the world today. They're never isolated to just one subject, right? Here, you're learning how different domains interact and collide. You're no longer just looking at quantum computing in a vacuum. You're analyzing the global trade impacts and the ethical considerations of that quantum computing.
As the source document explicitly states, this degree transforms knowledge into advanced mastery. It's all about building the crucial intellectual maturity required to solve multi-domain problems. You absolutely must develop this level of deep, interconnected understanding before you can even attempt to move to the final, most demanding stage of the universal major.
Section 5. Degree 4, Civilization Integration.
And this brings us to the climax of the curriculum. This is where passive academic learning transforms entirely into active creation. Using our construction metaphor one last time, this phase is building the city. The goal here is almost staggering to think about. Integrate the entire universe into one cohesive civilization. You're weaving together physics, biology, economics, and ethics. You aren't just studying these fields anymore, you're using them to design global systems from the ground up. You take modules like black hole physics, AI civilization architecture, and global governance systems, and you figure out how they all actually run together. This culminates in a completely unique title, Doctor of Universal Civilization. The curriculum defines this as the highest academic achievement, representing someone who integrates all universal knowledge to design complete global systems. I mean, imagine holding a title like that. You aren't just a specialist in a lab. You are actively learning how to design a society from scratch, harmonizing human behavior, infrastructure, and advanced technology.
Section 6. Architecture of all knowledge.
This brings us to the philosophical revelation of this whole explainer regarding how we actually process and store universal information. You might be remembering the rote memorization of traditional school. Trying to list every historical event, every single chemical reaction, or every microfact. The source document calls this the impossible way. It's infinite and completely futile. So, the crucial point is, how do you actually teach absolutely everything without taking a million years to do it? Well, you use the correct way, teaching the overarching domains, systems, laws, and frameworks.
As the creator of this curriculum perfectly summarizes it, you did not just cover knowledge, you cover the architecture of knowledge. And that is really the core thesis of scaling the 4 degrees of knowledge. Once a student understands the universal frameworks taught across this journey, they can easily deduce the infinite details inside them. You don't need to memorize every possible chemical reaction if you fully understand the fundamental systems of physical chemistry. It's a brilliantly structured, highly efficient approach to total education.
This framework challenges us to completely rethink what it means to be educated. We've gone from basic awareness to foundational mastery, through advanced depth, all the way to civilizational integration. Which leaves us with one final provocative question based on this 3,400-hour journey. Are you ready to design a civilization?
Usually when we think about getting an education, we treat it a lot like, like going to a grocery store, I guess.
Right, yeah, like filling a cart.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you take a cart, you roll down the aisles, and you pick up these discrete, totally separate items, like a little bit of cell biology over here, and then maybe a semester of European history over there.
Right, maybe a coding boot camp just to round things out.
Yeah, exactly. And when you finally check out, you just sort of hope all those random ingredients can somehow be cooked into, I don't know, a coherent understanding of the world.
Well, and it's highly fragmented. And that's actually a feature of the modern academic system, not a bug.
Yeah.
The assumption is that you will figure out the recipe on your own, assuming there even is one.
Right.
But most people just end up with a cart full of completely disconnected knowledge.
Which is exactly why our mission for this deep dive is so wild. Because today we are looking at this massive source document that claims to have built the ultimate single map of reality.
Yeah, it's something else.
It really is. It is a huge PDF, simply titled The Universal Major Curriculums, and it's addressed to a specific student named Mohammed.
Right, just one guy.
Yeah. And it doesn't just show you one aisle of the grocery store. It claims to encompass the entire store, the supply chain, the physics of the building, and the ethics of the people running it.
It bills itself as the first academic program in human history designed to teach the entire universe in one unified curriculum.
Which is a massive claim.
What's fascinating here is the sheer audacity of that premise. When you read through this text to Mohammed, you realize this isn't just a syllabus.
No.
It's a direct response to that modern condition of intellectual fragmentation.
Yeah.
The author is essentially saying that our current way of learning is broken because it lacks a cohesive architecture.
Okay, well, let's unpack this, because before we even get to the philosophy, the logistics alone are staggering.
Oh, yeah.
And frankly, a little suspect, because they aren't suggesting you go to a university campus for this.
No.
The universal major is designed to be delivered entirely on YouTube.
I know it sounds counterintuitive for a program of this scope.
Right. I mean, we're talking about 3,400 hours of live recordings. It's mapped out to take exactly 3 years and 2 months. The student logs in for 4 hours a day, specifically from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. Makkah time, 5 days a week.
It's a huge commitment.
It's a full-time job, and the promise is that it's open to every human being, and you walk away with a doctorate in universal civilization.
Right.
So I have to push back immediately. Are we seriously trusting a comprehensive understanding of the entire universe to the exact same platform that algorithmically feeds us cat videos and conspiracy theories?
Right.
Like, is this just the ultimate delusional educational life hack?
I challenge that framing slightly because the choice of medium is actually central to the curriculum's philosophy.
Okay.
Yes, YouTube is a chaotic platform, but it is also the most frictionless distribution network in human history. If your stated goal is to offer a doctorate in universal civilization to every human being on Earth, putting it behind the gated walls of an Ivy League institution completely defeats the purpose.
Right. You can't have universal access if it costs $100,000 a year.
Exactly. The author is prioritizing total unrestricted access over traditional academic prestige.
So it's an intentional democratization.
Precisely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we are living in an era of extreme information overload.
Oh, definitely.
We have access to more facts than any generation in human history, yet we often feel utterly incapable of making sense of the world.
Yeah, we're just drowning in it.
So the appeal of a single unified framework, a map that organizes reality into manageable connected zones, is incredibly alluring. But a map is only useful if people can actually get their hands on it.
Okay. I can see the argument for accessibility. But to understand how someone even attempts to teach the universe free or not, we have to look at how they categorize existence. Because if you are sitting down with a blank sheet of paper, how do you actually slice up the cosmos into a syllabus without your brain melting?
That's where the architecture of this document gets really revealing.
Okay.
The curriculum asserts that all knowledge in the universe fits into specific universal domains.
Like broad categories.
Yeah. Early in the document, it lays out 12 of these domains. But as you read further into the text, the author actually expands this to 16 domains.
Oh, they realize they missed a few things.
Basically, yes. They end up splitting out biology and medicine into distinct categories, and they separate earth science and astronomy from physics, giving them their own distinct weight.
It's like they're building a brand new Dewey Decimal System.
That's a good way to look at it, though. I'd say it's more foundational.
How so?
Well, the Dewey Decimal System organizes books that already exist. This curriculum is trying to organize the raw concepts of existence itself, so you can theoretically build a world from scratch.
Let's look at those domains because the juxtaposition is striking. You see the standard heavy hitters like physical universe engineering and technology computing and AI mathematics.
The STEM fields, basically.
Yeah, it's STEM fields. But then right alongside them, carrying the exact same structural importance and credit hours, you have revelation and divine knowledge, civilization, design, humanities, arts, and personal development.
The equal weighting is arguably the most radical part of the document.
Yeah, it really stood out to me.
This isn't a curriculum that treats science as the main course and ethics or theology as an optional side dish.
Right.
Under the revelation domain, for example, students are tasked with studying the Quran, the Bible, the Torah, the Gospel, and the Hadith.
Wow, all of them.
All of them. But they aren't studying them just as historical literature.
Right. They are analyzing these texts as foundational systems of human ethics, justice, and governance.
Exactly. It's a completely holistic view of human progress that flat out refuses to separate the spiritual and ethical dimensions from the technological and scientific ones.
Which is so rare.
It is. Think about how we typically design a global trade system today.
Okay.
We might optimize purely for supply chain efficiency using AI, which sits in the technology domain.
Right. We just want it to be fast and cheap.
Exactly. But this curriculum forces the student to ask, How do you integrate the ethical constraints found in historical revelation, like fairness, or the prohibition of exploitation, into the actual data structures of that AI?
Which is so different from how we usually compartmentalize our learning. I mean, usually the physics building is on the north side of the campus and the theology or philosophy building is on the south side.
And they never talk to each other.
Never. Those students never even cross paths.
Mhm.
But here they are, literally the first and third domains of the same unified major.
It forces integration from day one.
And the text lists 211 total subjects across these 16 domains. But that just brings me back to the logistics. Yeah, the hours. Because having a beautifully organized filing cabinet with 16 drawers and 211 folders is great in theory, but how do you actually teach a human being all of that without it taking their entire lifetime?
Well, that's a challenge.
If they aren't separating theology from quantum physics, how does a student actually process that information?
This is where the curriculum introduces its most clever mechanical feature, which is the pedagogical concept of the spiral.
Spiral, okay.
The 3,400 hours aren't just a straight sequential line from subject A to subject Z.
So you don't just do all the math first.
No, you don't spend 3 months on math, finish it, and move on to history. Instead, the curriculum is split into 4 distinct academic degrees, and the student revisits every single one of those 211 subjects 4 separate times.
The spiral. So you don't just take a calculus class, pass the final exam, and then promptly forget everything because you never look at an equation again.
But you do look at it again, but with an entirely different lens each time.
Yeah.
The document lays out these 4 loops. The first loop is the associate degree. It's 600 hours, taking about 7.5 months. And the stated purpose is simply to see the whole universe.
Now, I need to pause here because I was looking at the hour allocations for this associate degree, and I don't buy it.
You don't buy the hours?
No. They are allocating exactly 10 hours to quantum basics and 10 hours to constitutional awareness and 10 hours to cell biology. 10 hours. I don't care how good the YouTube videos are. How can 10 hours possibly be enough time to learn physics or constitutional law?
It's absolutely not enough time to achieve mastery, and the curriculum explicitly acknowledges that.
Okay, so what's the point then?
You have to remember the goal of this first loop. The associate degree is entirely about orientation.
Orientation.
Think about how adults actually learn in the real world, like when you are onboarding at a complex new job.
You usually just want to know where the bathroom is and who you're supposed to report to.
Right. You need the lay of the land. If I drop you into a dense 200-hour course on quantum mechanics, without you having any context for where quantum mechanics fits into the broader universe of physics, or how it ultimately relates to computing and AI, you're going to be lost.
You'll just be memorizing equations without understanding the landscape.
Exactly. The associate degree just gives you the vocabulary and the boundaries of the puzzle box.
Oh, I see. So it's building a mental scaffold.
Yes.
It reminds me of when you decide to learn a complex new piece of software, like a video editor.
Oh, yeah, that's a great example.
The worst way to learn is to read the 500-page manual cover to cover.
You'll fall asleep.
You'll retain nothing.
The best way is to spend 10 hours just clicking around, figuring out what the buttons are called, and making a terrible, clunky video.
Exactly.
You don't master it, but you build a framework.
That's a perfect parallel. Having a shallow but complete mental scaffold allows all future deeper learning to actually stick, rather than sliding off a confused brain.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, actually. So after that 600-hour orientation, you move to the second loop, which is the bachelor degree.
Right, the second time around the spiral.
This is 1,000 hours, roughly 12.5 months. The document calls this Learn the Universe Properly.
Learn it properly, so no more just clicking around.
Right. This is where you move from basic awareness into foundational mastery. That initial 10 hours of physics awareness turns into 180 hours of physical universe studies.
Oh, wow.
So you're doing classical mechanics, thermodynamics, electromagnetism, chemistry.
It's actually learning the math this time.
You're learning the mechanics. And then the spiral widens again into the third loop, the master degree.
Okay.
This is 900 hours, taking a little over 11 months. The motto here is go deep in everything.
Go deep in everything.
You aren't just learning foundations anymore. You are getting into advanced depth case studies and crucially cross-domain connections.
Yeah, the master degree is where the syllabus starts looking really intimidating.
It's heavy.
You start seeing courses like deep learning robotics and advanced space-time systems. But I have to say, my skepticism about those initial 10-hour blocks, the author of this curriculum, actually anticipates that exact pushback.
They do.
At the very end of the document, they address this Mohammed character directly, and they reveal the core philosophical thesis of this entire educational system.
They do, and it is a vital clarification.
Yeah.
The author asks themselves the critical question, does this truly cover every knowledge in the universe?
Because that is a massive, almost absurd claim to make, even with 3,400 hours.
Right.
And the way they answer it is fascinating. They identify two completely different ways to teach. The first is what they call the impossible way.
The impassable way.
This is where you try to list every single microfact, every historical event, every biological variation, every chemical reaction, every line of code ever written.
The document is very blunt about this. It says, this is infinite. No university, no AI, no civilization has ever done this. It is not possible.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because they contrast that infinite impossibility with what they call the correct way. They argue that instead of teaching every microfact, you cover the domains, and inside those domains, you teach the structures, the principles, the laws, and the systems.
Right, the framework.
The argument is that once a student understands the architecture of a system, they can understand any detail inside it.
Yes.
It over is the difference between trying to memorize every single bolt wire and screw on a specific 2015 Honda Civic.
Versus learning the fundamental principles of how an internal combustion engine works.
Exactly.
If you know the engine, you don't just know the Civic.
Right.
You can pop the hood on a Ford or a Toyota or even a tractor and still fundamentally know what you're looking at.
Yeah, you understand the physics of it.
One method gives you a bunch of disconnected trivia that is only useful for that one specific car, while the other gives you a mental model that lets you understand almost any vehicle on the road.
It's focusing on the physics of the problem rather than the history of the problem.
Exactly.
If you understand the laws of thermodynamics, you don't need to memorize every single time a cup of coffee has ever cooled down in human history.
Right.
You just understand why heat transfers.
This raises an important question about our current educational paradigms, and it's a profound insight for anyone like our listeners trying to learn a complex subject today.
Absolutely.
We often burn out because we're trying to memorize the bolts on the Honda Civic.
Yeah, we really do.
We try to absorb an endless stream of isolated facts from podcasts, newsletters, and books.
It's exhausting.
But this document argues that real intelligence, real universal education, is about understanding the framework. It's teaching the machinery of how things happen, not just a historical log of what has happened.
Which brings us back to the listener's own experience. I mean, if you are trying to catch up on a massive field like artificial intelligence, you don't need to read every single paper published last week.
Please don't.
Yeah, you'll lose your mind. You just need to understand the underlying systems, like what a neural network is, how training data works.
Like the architecture.
Once you have the system down, every new headline makes sense.
And that distinction between trivia and systemic mental models is the engine that drives this entire 3,400-hour journey. Because you need that systemic understanding for what happens next. The curriculum doesn't just stop at the master's level.
Right, there's one in a loop.
It pushes into a final fourth loop, which represents a massive paradigm shift in what education is actually supposed to achieve.
Right. So you've spent nearly 2.5 years looping through the universe.
Yeah.
You've gone from awareness to foundation to advanced depth. But what happens when you reach the end of that fourth loop?
Right. What's the point?
What is the ultimate purpose of downloading the machinery of the universe into one human brain? That brings us to the doctorate degree.
The doctorate degree is another 900 hours, so another 11+ months of intensive study.
Wow.
But the purpose here completely shifts. The stated goal of this final degree is to integrate the universe into civilization.
I notice such a massive shift in tone when reading the subjects for this level.
Oh yeah, it's very different.
It stops sounding like a school syllabus and starts sounding like a blueprint for a new society. You aren't just taking advanced physics anymore. You are taking space-time civilization.
Right.
You aren't just studying algorithms. You're taking AI civilization architecture. You're studying universal economic systems.
It treats the student not as a passive sponge soaking up data, but as an active architect.
It's almost like they are training you to play the ultimate world-building simulation.
Consider how different that is from modern academia.
Yeah, completely different.
It represents a complete inversion of how we currently define a doctorate. Think about a traditional PhD program today.
Okay.
The entire structure is based on hyper-specialization. You start broad in undergrad, and by the time you reach your PhD, you are focusing on an incredibly narrow slice of reality.
Right.
You become the world's foremost expert on one specific type of beetle in the Amazon, or one highly specific cryptographic protocol.
You essentially know everything about nothing.
You dig a very deep, very narrow well. And while that is vital for pushing the boundaries of specific scientific frontiers, the universal major argues that the highest level of human academic achievement shouldn't be microscopic focus.
It should be macroscopic.
It should be macroscopic integration. The goal is to produce a doctor of universal civilization.
So what does that actually look like in practice? Let's build a scenario.
Okay, let's say there is a global crisis regarding resource allocation, like food and water scarcity.
Okay, a big global problem.
A highly specialized economist might try to solve it purely through market incentives.
Right, they look at the money.
And a biologist might try to genetically modify a higher yield crop. Both are isolated solutions.
But the doctor of universal civilization
Is trained to look at the whole board.
Right.
They don't just know biology or just know economics. They connect the biological realities of the crop with the economic realities of global trade. Filter that solution through a framework of ethical governance drawn from historical revelation, and implement the distribution using AI and autonomous infrastructure. They are trained to see how pulling a lever in Domain 4 affects Domain 12.
It's systems thinking applied to the survival of the human race.
Exactly.
It's incredibly ambitious, bordering on utopian, really.
It is very utopian.
But whether or not one person can actually achieve that in 3,400 hours on YouTube, while the framework itself is undeniably compelling.
I completely agree.
So what does this all mean for us, for the person listening to this right now who isn't necessarily going to drop everything and spend the next 3 years working on a theoretical YouTube doctorate?
Right, we've got jobs.
Yeah, how do we bring this massive cosmic map back down to Earth?
I think the most immediate takeaway is to audit your own learning process.
Audit your learning process.
Look at the elegance of this framework. It forces you to categorize existence, to not just wander the grocery store aisles aimlessly.
Yeah.
It champions the spiral method, revisiting topics to build depth over time rather than cramming and forgetting.
Right, you don't just learn it once and dump it.
And most importantly, it prioritizes systems and frameworks over isolated facts.
It's asking you to look at your own mental map. When you read an article or take a course for your job, where does that information go?
Exactly.
Do you have a structured filing cabinet for your learning? Do you actively try to connect the new software tool you just learned about with human psychology or with ethics or with biology?
Okay, just sitting there.
Right. Is your knowledge just a pile of random facts sitting on the floor of your mind?
It's the challenge to break out of our silos. The universal major is an extreme example, certainly, but its core philosophy is incredibly sound. It suggests that to truly understand any one thing, you have to at least have an awareness of how it connects to everything else.
The universal major insists that every single domain is absolutely necessary to build a complete functioning civilization.
Right, from the theology to the math.
From theology and art all the way to quantum physics and AI. It leaves you wondering, if you were the architect and you had to knock out just one of those 16 pillars.
Oh, that's a tough question.
Say you remove art or you remove computing. How long would it be before the entire civilization you just built collapses entirely?